In this video, we're going to look at creating vector fill, block fill, and form fill. So to get started, what I'll do is use my Digitize tool to create some shapes, and maybe I'll just type S on my keyboard so I can choose to insert a shape and just get a basic kind of square shape. And once that's created, I'm going to use copy and paste to bring in and make a few duplicates of this object. And so we can use one to sort of study the vector fill, and one to study the block fill, and one to study the form fill. So I'll go ahead and zoom in on the first square and just demonstrate if you want to add vector fill or any of these fill objects, you have to first of all select something. So once it's selected, if you right click, you'll get the menu, and from the drop down menu, the right click menu, we choose add. And here you can see we have several options, and one of them is vector fill, block fill, and form fill. Now there's also envelope and sections, which I've looked at different places of this video, but today in this video I'm going to study vector fill, block fill, and form fill. So we'll start with vector fill, and you'll notice as soon as I select that, my mouse has become a cursor which I could use to draw in points. And whoops, of course I right clicked. So what does right click do but end the operation? And so I'll just start over because I clicked the wrong, and I need to left click to draw in the points of a shape, and it can be any shape you want. I'll kind of draw, well, it's not really a circle, but I'll draw something kind of circle like. And if I want to close it, like have a closed circle, I actually have to draw all the way around. So I'll click on the last one. And now I'm going to right click to finish. And so you'll notice right away a very distinct thing happened, because before we had step. Now, by nature, a vector fill will have needle points along the outer edge, and then needle points along any vector line that you drew. So because I drew like a whole complete circle here, you can see that my vector line goes all the way around. And so there's no needle points anywhere in between. And you can have as many lines as you want in your vector. For example, if I say right click and add, I can add more vector fill, and I could add a line right here. If I right click, it stops drawing that line but allows me to keep drawing, so I could put in more points, whatever. It's up to you, and right click to stop drawing that line, and if I right click, it'll cut those lines out of my vector fill. So you can draw by continuing to draw lines any sort of a pattern that you want on top of your existing fill. So I'll just give you an idea of how you can pattern in a vector. So you take the shape and then you apply the kind of like carving lines into the satin stitch. So that's called vector fill, and in general that's how it works. Now if I select the edit nodes tool, notice that all of the points for those lines that I digitized become available, and so if I wanted to, I could move them, or I could delete them. I could add new ones. So like anytime you're in edit shape node, if I right click over top of the line, it allows me to insert a node, and so I could insert additional nodes and play with their tangents and get the shapes to be. So really it's like digitizing a shape within a shape. I also have the original stitch angle in here, which I can adjust the direction of the fill to make it be the best angle to complement the lines that I've carved out. And at any time, if I decide I need more lines, I can just right click and say add vector fill and draw in any additional lines that are required. Yeah. Perhaps what I'll do is just paste in another rectangle over top and put it over here and show not only can you draw your own vectors, but you can insert them from characters as well. So for example, if I right click and choose to add a vector fill, and while my cursor is in this cross form, if I type S, it would allow me to choose any number of the insert shape options. So if you choose spiral and then click and drag to create a spiral, it will put a spiral into, the block. And same thing, I'll just move over and do that, maybe again, paste, and this one will insert. So I'll again choose add, vector fill, and now I'm going to type T to get the character choices. And so you could put in a letter here, for example, and this is from any true type font in your computer. So if you want to choose Arial Black and put in the letter T or something onto your fill, then you can, and when you click, it'll set down the letter T. And so in this case, my letter T is even bigger than my block, and so it's going to hang off like that. And I believe I would be able to reshape that. So what I have to do here is choose the Edit Shape Points tool and then select those points. Hold my Control key down to kind of minus that corner point, and then I should be able to just bring down the size of that vectored shape in the vector fill. So yeah, that's the concept. And keep in mind too that when you have the characters, there's lots of little sort of symbols and things that could also be included in there. So if I hit paste, we'll just do it one more time quickly here. And then I choose to add a vector fill, and then again typing T. If I go down to, for example, I know I have Webdings and Wimdings. There's several fonts here that are symbol-based fonts and not character-based fonts. And so these would give you the ability to type in, a letter to get a symbol, which you could then place into your fill. Yeah. And if you need to make edits, you choose the Edit Shape Nodes tool, where you can then, you could reshape your fill to fit your vectors, or reshape your vectors to fit your fill, whatever you need to do. That's the way it works. So that's vector fill, and now I'll just reset my thoughts and come back and talk about block fill. Now we're going to take a look at creating block fill. And block fill is similar to vector fill in that we get to draw the shape of the design that's going to, carve out our fill. The main difference is now that whatever shape we use is going to become repeated within our block, within our fill. So let me demonstrate. First of all, I'm just going to select the one that I have already, and I'm going to copy it, and then I'll be able to easily paste in and keep making demonstrations. So what we'll do is right click and choose to add block fill. And again, I'm given a cursor to draw in a shape for my block, and I'll just simply put in a point. So I'll click to add the first point, and then maybe I'll just do 3 small points to make a little kind of horseshoe, and right click to let go. And I don't want to draw any more vectors at the moment, so I'll right click again, and that will get it to cut out the vector. And as you can see, it repeats over and over to fill the shape. So that vector that I drew repeats over and over. Now, that is different than if we do, so in the vector fill, it would just have shown the one carving right where I carved it. But because we've gone with block fill, it repeats it along to fill the entire shape over and over. Now, I can have, so first of all, if I choose the Edit Nodes tool, it's going to show me several things. First of all, it shows me red points, which are the shape of my square, which I could change if I wanted to, reshape my square. The next thing they give me is purple handles, which I can use to change the direction of the stitches. And with the different stitch angle, I may get more points that fall along the vector lines that I draw, and therefore shows it a little better. Now, the green points are the original vector that I drew, and you can see if I zoom in on them that I could easily, come in and change the points of the vector to make it, whatever shape I wanted to. You can add points to your vector by right-clicking, getting the second menu, insert nodes, and draw, change that line. There's also two copies of the line here in red, and those represent the layout or the way that they repeat. And so by adjusting these lines, if I make them, move the one down and you see it move down. If I move the other one over, it makes more space. And so you kind of get to decide how your layout will appear within your shape. And so you can draw any shape you want and then get it to take on any repeat that you want. So maybe I'll just try and tweak this back to make it look like dragon scales. So I'll just make a simple curve. And then you can decide how you want those scales to appear within your design. So maybe I'll have this one repeat there, and this one kind of come down halfway. So it's up to you, I guess, to make your layout and your pattern. But so the main thing, now I'm just going to hit paste. The main thing with block fill that's different from the form fill is that it fills, or sorry, not the form fill, that's the next one. The vector fill is that here we got one copy of the lines we drew. Here we get multiple copies to fill in the area. Otherwise, you draw it, and it's the same thing. Before, I could say add, block fill, and then choose to insert a character or a symbol. So if I type in S, it gives me the option of adding in a polygon, and then I'll basically click and drag to get the shape of my polygon, and then right click and my polygon gets repeated. And again, choose the layout menu to decide how your polygons get arranged within your shape. So if you want to make yourself pattern with stars and polygons in the background, then you can. One more time I'll do it, and this time I'll put in, I guess, some sort of a symbol or something like that. So again, right click and say add, block fill. I'm going to type in T to give a character, and maybe what we'll do is look for the symbols again. So down here in Windings, put in a little sort of peace symbol. And it repeats. Now, if I make the block bigger, let's see if I move this over here. It makes the vectors sort of resize with it. But if I want, smaller vectors, then what I need to do is come along and select all of the points of that pattern that I got, and then once they're selected, I can transform them. So I'll bring the size of it down, and then I'll make more copies of it by bringing this one up and over a little bit, and then make more copies of it by bringing this one over like that. And so you can see how I create the layout and the size of the block fill. So that's block fill. We've looked at vector fill, block fill, and I'll just reset again and we can take a look at creating form fill. Now we're going to take a look at how to create form fill. And form fill is very similar to the vector fill and the block fill that we've made, in that you still create you have to draw the points of what's going to be kind of carved out of the fill. What's different is it will not remove all of the needle points from our square as it did in the vector fill. This time it's going to leave all of the fill points and just carve out whatever we draw. So let's go ahead and demonstrate. I'll select this square and use copy so that I can quickly make new versions of it as needed, and then I'll right click and say add, and I'll choose form fill. And I'm going to type S on my keyboard so that I can quickly throw in a little rectangle here like this. And when I let go and right click, you can see that it's cut. You can basically see how it's cut those stitches out of the fill. In fact, if I turn off that 3D, first of all, if you turn off the 3D view, you don't even notice that it's there. You turn it on, oh, okay, turn it off. But if I turn on the stitch marks, you can really see it then. So notice when I look at this, how the step fill has got all the stitch marks, but they're completely voided out of the area where the rectangle is. And that's distinctly different from the block fill and the vector fill, where the only needle penetrations in those shapes were coming from the vectors that I drew and repeated or aligned, as the case may be. But with the form fill, I can add multiple ones. So we have just the one right now. If I want, I can right click, so select it first, and then add an additional form fill, draw in, another rectangle, give them robot eyes or something like that. I could also choose to add and draw my own lines, so you don't have to, you can choose to add a form fill and then draw in your lines. So I'll draw in a little triangle for a nose or whatever. I can draw in multiple things if I want to give them a mouth. You can see how, oops, maybe I'll do that one as a corner like this. So whatever, you draw the vectors of the design. And again, whatever is inside is voided out, and it looks like that. Now, you can combine them. So for example, if I choose add, and I choose to add a vector fill, because this one is already a form fill, it's not going to take all the stitches out. So if I draw a line, right here, it will cut that line out, but it didn't get rid of all the rest of the stitches as it does. So if you needed to have, add another vector fill, and you needed to have a line inside of his. See? So you can play with this to basically add your own dimension to the designs that you already have and just give it that little extra design. I'll try and find some examples from the provided clip art and then show you how you can continue to look at using vector fill, block fill, and form fill to enhance your embroidery designs. Now I'm going to create a few examples of using the form fill and the vector fill to enhance existing embroidery designs. And so what we'll do is we'll say open, and I'll just browse into the Creative Drawing sample designs and show, for example, if I select this frog. Okay, and I'll just turn on the three-dimensional preview. And so I'm just imagining where I could add more dimension and definition to the satin stitch columns in his legs. And so I'll select one of them and right click and say add and choose to add a vector fill. And then I can basically draw one or more lines. So there's one line. Maybe I'll draw another line right here. And right click to let go, and right click to be finished. And see, so what I've done is I've added some muscle definition lines to the leg of the frog. And so you could go ahead and add any dimension that you want to a design like that. Imagine that you had an elephant and you wanted to carve out all of the sort of wrinkles of his skin out of a piece of weave fill. So that's the idea. You can add a vector sort of as you see it in just the right place to give it a little extra dimension. Another example I thought would be fun, and I'm just going to scroll to the bottom where there's this heart design with some hearts in it. And so I'm just going to select it and make it a little bit larger for the demonstration. And then imagine taking the heart and applying lettering into the fill of the heart. So if this is what it looks like sort of standard, and then I selected the red and said to add a form fill, and then type T on my keyboard, and then choose the capital letter I. So maybe I'll choose a font that has, let's see what this looks like. Okay, and if I right click to let go, you'll see that it carves the letter I out of my fill. Now I may need to use node editing in this case to, first of all, I can change the stitch direction to give the best appearance. I can also use that node editing to actually select the letter I that I drew. Now what I just did was I clicked on the outline and inserted and moved a point on the outline, so I'm going to hit undo to fix that But what I wanted to do was click and drag to select all of the nodes of the letter I, which would give me the ability to either click and move the location of that I, or if needed I could resize it. And so the concept is we could make this say I love you right in the fill of these hearts. And so I'll just do, maybe I won't do every single letter, but I'll do enough to give you the concept. So I type T, all right, capital letter L. You can set the size here, so if you're having troubles with the size being too big, you can reduce it right now, and then when I click, it's going to put that on my screen, and right click and it's going to finish. Now, I'm still in that edit nodes mode, which is why I can click and drag to get a box around that letter L, and then I can move it by clicking and dragging to place it wherever I want, and I could resize it, transform it, I guess is the correct word, to get it to be, whatever sort of size I wanted. And again, I can use the purple line on the fill to get any stitch angle that I want. So if I found that there was a good angle for, capturing the essence of my lettering. And then you would just keep building the letters. So you would just simply repeat, add, form fill to do the next letter. So it doesn't have the ability to type in the whole word here. It's one letter at a time, so kind of a drawback, but that's okay. It's actually interesting because let's make this smaller again. It makes it easier. I'll show you what I can do now because I can, so node edits, drag a box around the O. I can make these start to intersect or overlap a little bit. So if I want the O and the L to be connected like that, I can. And so again, you just keep going with adding in. So new one, so select it, right click, add, form fill, type the letter T to get my character box to come up, LOV, so we add in the next letter. It's probably going to be big because I didn't resize it. Now that gives me the opportunity to go through a bit of what could be an issue. So now I want to select the letter V to resize it. And when I do, I'm going to get some nodes that I don't want. For example, this one and these ones. And I can tell I got them because see how they get a little bit bigger? Like if I zoom in here, see how this one's bigger than that one? I'm just going to hold my control key down and click on it to let go of it. So I needed to let go of all of those ones, and it looks like even that one. And then over here, I needed to let go of this one. Now, I believe I just have the letter V, and I should be able to make that a little bit smaller, and then move that over and get it to connect over, with my letter O. And yeah, I'll do it one more time just so we have the whole word added in. Type in E, maybe make it smaller to start out with, and then right click to finish, and then we'll just select that letter E, and it looks like I'm going to need to unselect that node. And yeah, then I can simply bring that over and make it fit wherever I like, or resize as needed. And then the stitch angle, once I have those all in place, I can play with it a little bit just to see if I'm getting the most sort of definition. So that one didn't look as good as it does over here. Let's try. So you can see how I bring out more or less definition to the word love like that. Yeah, so, and that's the difference. Now you could also create a block fill. So if I say add block fill, and then maybe I'll just try and see if I can't freehand in a little heart here. So let's see how well I can do this. Not the best heart in the world, but it gets the point across. You can draw your own little heart. Choose the Reshape Nodes tool. Make my heart smaller. Overlap them. Design my pattern. Yeah. So I hope that gives you more inspiration into how you can incorporate the form fill, the block fill, and the vector fill into your embroidery designs.